starting and just introducing yourself and introducing the film?
Yeah, so my name is Steven Latham. I'm the producer and co-director of the Mustangs, America's Wild Horses. And this is a 90-minute feature documentary that is coming to your big screen very, very soon.
Okay, awesome. And I'm Daniel Prinn. I am a staff writer here at The Movie Buff, and I am one of the hosts of The Movie Buff show. I think we have like a cycle of hosts, but today you get two of us.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Yeah, Arpit, did you want to introduce yourself too?
Sure, I'm Arpit, another buff.
Arpit, did you want to start with your questions?
Sure, I have two questions for you, in the beginning. So I would love to know first that, what inspired you to become a filmmaker? And if you can just shortly say about a bit of your journey. Another question that I would love to ask you is that I'm pretty sure that not many people know this thing that, what is the difference between a wild horse and a domestic horse?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I think a lot of the things in this film are going to, open up a lot of people's eyes about wild horses and its connection to our sort of collective past. But my journey began about 20 years ago. I had worked for the studios for a number of years in Los Angeles and was more on the development side, the publicity side, on the marketing side. And I had really learned, that's how I really kind of learned the film business, by the jobs that I had. But I had an idea that I wanted to make, and it was a project that I wanted to tell stories about people that lived every day of the 20th century. So I created a series called The Living Century. And I was really fortunate to have Barbara Streisand as my executive producer. And we told this film series about these incredible people that it felt very Walter Mitty-ish, like these are real people that were like the oldest player from the Negro baseball leagues or the last survivor of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. And it was an incredibly exciting series, but that project was what led me to become a filmmaker. And since then I've focused on documentaries, on feature docs and series. And I created and currently produce a series on PBS called Shelter Me, which tells these incredible stories about the human animal bond. And now I just I find stories that inspire me that I think are going to inspire others and bring them to life. But in terms of like domestic horses versus wild horses, the biggest differentiation is that wild horses, they're the ones that live on our public lands without fences, without restraints. There's others that live on like land that's managed by like the Forestry Service and everything. But essentially the story of wild horses goes back to, the 1500s, when the Spanish conquistadors came over to America, and they would trade horses with indigenous people. And then horses would get away from ranches and they would mix. And essentially that created the current day Mustang. And there are now almost 90,000 wild horses on 10 Western states. And there's over 50,000 that are in government holding facilities, corrals, once they round them up. And what's really interesting is most people don't even know there still are wild horses in America. And the story of the horse is completely meshed with the story of America in terms of building this country and heading west and spreading west and all of that. So the wild horse is a symbol of freedom. It's a symbol of strength, a symbol of independence. And they are under threat and they are under duress. And their story is a story of where people love to revere a symbol, but they don't necessarily do all the work that's needed to protect the actual thing. And our story in our film kind of gets into that. And it's a heck of a journey. And we take people on a ride throughout the West.
But with that, it's kind of like step over American bald eagle. We got Mustangs.
Well, a case could be made. A case could be made that the wild horse should be the symbol of America for what it's done. We shipped them to World War I. They pulled our trolley cars. We sent them to cities to do work. They helped build this country. And the thing about it is that they have been a partner with us. There is a human animal bond with these wild horses, and the ones that are still out there and still free, we have a responsibility to manage them responsibly, because again, they have been their story is one of exploitation and a story of people turning them into dog food and really doing a real disservice to this incredible animal. And the one thing you always hear from people who've worked with wild horses or been around wild horses, there's nothing like it. They are incredible. There is a bond when you get to know them once they've been sort of rounded up and you've trained them. But when they're in the wild and you get to see them in their own element, it's a thing of beauty.
Was the first time you saw a wild horse, was it on this film or was it before?
So when I grew up on the East Coast, and when I was a kid, I had seen wild horses in a part of Virginia called Chincoteague. There's an island off of called Assateague, and some kids know the story Misty of Chincoteague. And so that's a storied herd in Virginia of the Chincoteague horses. So I had seen them then. But as an adult, the first time I saw a wild horse was on this project when we went out to Wyoming and spent hours looking at, and then we came around this corner, and just like we do in the film, our film, you see wild horses as an audience is when we saw them as filmmakers, the first time we come around this bend, and it was a big experience. The big difference between the horses in Virginia and the ones that we focused on is, we focused on the ones that are on Bureau of Land Management lands, public lands, because that's where the most number of horses are. And it was a story that most people just weren't aware of. So we really focused on those. But there are other pockets of wild horses, like in the Outer Banks in North Carolina, and in Chincoteague, and then in North Dakota, the Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and in like the California-Oregon border. But some are managed by the Forest Service, some are managed by the Park Service, and you can kind of see how it can get complicated pretty quickly. But we focused on ones that are the Bureau of Land Management managed horses. Now,
for the listeners who don't know, what does that mean?
Yeah, so part of this management problem is because these horses are kind of stuck in this middle of this sort of government, kind of like an alphabet soup of government agencies. You've got the Department of Interior, you've got the Bureau of Land Management, and then you have the the Wild Horse and Burro Program. So just think of that bureaucracy just before you even step foot on the lands. But in this country, the federal lands are your land and they're my land. These are public lands. We own them. And on that land, and the biggest majority is managed by the Bureau of Land Management. But what gets lost a lot in the conversation around activists around wild horses is that they don't realize that this is shared use, mixed use, that you have recreation, and you've got hunting, and you've got oil, and you've got farmers with lease rights and stuff to have livestock on it. So there's all these things that are being done with our public lands that a lot of people don't like, and hence you have a lot of butting of heads and a lot of controversy, and a lot of the wild horses are sort of stuck right in the bullseye of all of these people, because a lot of people just say, hey, we want the wild horses to be left free on our land, our public lands. And then other people say, well, you can't do that. And now we've got, drought, which is here. The climate change is here, and it's impacting these animals as well. So there's a lot of issues why you really have to sort of understand where we came from and where we're going, instead of just saying, aren't they pretty? Let's just leave them alone. And that's kind of what we wanted to address in this film. Is we wanted to show them in the wild. We wanted to show some of the issues. We wanted to make it fun and exciting. We wanted to show people that are working, with these wild horses. And I think we pulled off something really interesting for people to, kind of see something that they wouldn't see in their normal life.
Yeah, I think so. And just before I let Arpit jump back in here, I'm a research nerd, so I was just kind of wondering, like, what was the most surprising thing you found out? Like, what was the most disturbing thing you found out?
So one of the things, when we were telling this story is, when a story unfolds for the audience, you find out that an act was passed in 1971. We're coming up on the 50-year anniversary of this federal act that basically preserved, wild horses from going extinct. I mean, truly, that you weren't allowed to hunt and kill and harass wild horses on federal lands. And as crazy as that sounds, it was being done to the point of in less than 100 years, we took 2 million wild horses on the range and brought it down to 10,000. We literally almost by what we are so good at is almost made it extinct. And so, one of the things that was really so surprising to me was, we brought to life this incredible woman named Wild Horse Annie, Velma Johnston. And, she was, I've done a lot of work in animal welfare, and she was just someone I had literally never heard of before. And she simply was, probably the most important person in the history of wild horses. That she went from her home state in Nevada all the way to Washington, D.C. to pass this law, and she brought along an army of children to protect wild horses. And we went into these archives and we found stuff that hadn't been used since they were broadcast in 1971, and we brought her to life. And she's a force. She shows that you can use your skills as powers of good, and she really engaged people to really understand why that this issue is important and they need protecting. And then conversely, when I was on this journey and I kept finding out that the way that we've been managing horses for 50 years is the population expands, and then we bring out the helicopters on the range and we round them up. Then we put them in holding in these basically feedlots, these government corrals. And there's tools that we have to manage them, like fertility control. We cover something about, called, darting with this vaccine called PZP, where you dart the mares, and that can help lower the birth rate. But ultimately, when you're talking to the BLM, and there's some people in the BLM that truly care about these horses, but it's a huge government bureaucracy. And to literally get things done where people are going to stick their neck out to make changes, you don't see that a lot, which is really, part of the story and part of the issue. But the thing that was sort of, just crazy is that you would talk to people saying, well, what is the policy moving forward? And they would say, we're going to let the population expand, and we're going to round them up, and we're going to put them in these holding facilities. So the holding facilities are expanding, costing a ton of money, and yet the horses aren't being managed responsibly. But we've been doing this for decades after decades, and we're still doing that. At the end of this film, we finish a message of hope. We have Robert Redford, who's one of the executive producers, kind of says, he rounds out the story, and there is some hope. But we can't be idle. And that's, one of the takeaways is that, you have to be a participant in democracy. You can't just be on the sidelines. You have to literally participate and let your voice be known of the things that you care about. And I would argue that our heritage and our wild horses is something that we should care about, and it should be known by more people.
Okay, awesome. I'll let Arpit jump in with some of his.
Sure. So, what the documentary of yours shows, that it shows the whole history of the wild horse from the World War I till now, which is fascinating for sure. But what I found very touchy and unique, that the way you have shown the relationship of horses with their trainers, and how that whole relation, has transformed a community who is, just talking about and understanding the voice of unherds, the people who can't talk. Definitely talking about the wild horse, and how pure is that emotion, which I love. So I would love to ask that, while you were framing this whole documentary, was all these subjects were always in your mind?
Yeah, I'm glad, you picked up on that, because, what we wanted to do, so I wanted those stories, but I didn't know what stories were going to be included, because this story truly unfolded as we were filming it. We had a sort of an outline of how we wanted to explain the stories, but we really didn't want to just go, character shopping and just say, well, we want that story. So it had to organically unfold, to tell the story correctly. And we were very fortunate. There were a lot of things that lined up where the stories intersected on this. And so it doesn't feel disjointed. There's all these pieces where trainers ended up taking horses from Wyoming that we filmed in, and then training them in Fort Worth. And then a veterans group that we feature, adopts them, and then we tell that story. So, it's almost like a baton handoff between these stories. I certainly knew that going into this film that I wanted to show different people that are working with wild horses, because that's the truth of the matter with this subject matter. Some people like keep saying that we should just let them all be free. I wanted to show the reality. These horses have to have, it's better than to get a purpose, a second life, working with somebody or being a pet or a riding partner than just sitting in a feedlot, in a dusty feedlot all day. So that's why we wanted to pick characters and stories that show those that are touching, training, working with horses. So we have trainers, we have photographers, we have got people that are competing with these horses. As I just said previously, we have a wonderful story about a veterans organization that only uses wild horses to work with veterans with PTSD. And then, we show a sanctuary, which is like the next best thing to being, in the wild, where these horses get to be reunited and live free. And as we say in the film, it's like nature's classroom, because that's going to be a place where kids will be able to see wild horses, because it's really hard to get to places that we went to in Wyoming or Colorado. And then we show the really important story of these women in Colorado that are darting, that are literally doing fertility control. So those are the stories that sort of brought the film to life, and the ones that are actually working with, training, and spending time, with wild horses. And then we take people to some of these Bureau of Land Management holding facilities. So you get to, the audience gets to see what we saw. And there's no narration in the film. We have the introduction and the ending by Robert Redford, but everything in between, we use no narration. So we purposely did that to really bring audiences into the story, because we wanted them to feel what we felt, and not being told like a voice of God narration of what you're seeing, but literally feel like you're there and part of the story, and seeing these horses for the first time, and experiencing, their wildness, and also their bond, with people.
Yeah, and I was delighted to see the documentary, just to tell you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Did you guys know about wild horses before watching this?
I had a little idea about it, because I have seen something which required me to research a bit on horses. So yeah, I was aware, not this much, but yeah, a little.
Yeah, I knew about Mustangs, but I didn't realize that there were horses that were wild. So
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that the numbers really are increasing. I mean, we're talking, in the film, we explained it, but the government set the numbers that we should have. And again, you could argue this point and have a strong argument that the numbers should be increased, but they say we should only have between 26 and 27,000 wild horses on the range. And that's a law. And we currently we're approaching 90,000. And the ones that have been rounded up that are in captivity are over 50,000. So
Wow.
The numbers are getting bigger and bigger, and you truly have concern about climate and forage and water, and those issues are tied to all of us. So we try to we like that this film can expose people to these stories and not just be thought of as a horse film, but something that the public lands are something we're never taught about. We're never taught that these are our lands, and that they have been exploited, like a lot of things. And I learned a lot making this film. We were actually probably my team were probably the right people to make this film, because since we didn't know much about it, we had to understand it and know way more than what we put in, just to sort of take this journey. And so we didn't go in with an agenda. We didn't make this as an advocacy film. We didn't make this to be like, well, this is what we want. We ultimately want wild horses to do this or that. We just wanted to tell a heck of a story that we felt like, well, we don't know about it, and we talked to other people, and hardly anyone else knew about it. So we're like, let's take people on this road trip through the West.
Oh, cool. And it really is a road trip.
Yeah, it really is. Sure. We put a lot of miles on, and got a lot of drone shots in states all over, and we've got wonderful cinematography in the piece, and we're very fortunate to have really good music. We've got music by Bruce Springsteen and Emmylou Harris and Willie Nelson, and we have an original song that Diane Warren wrote, that Blanco Brown recorded. So a lot of people liked what we were doing, and they thought that our approach to this story was the right way to tell it.
Okay. I'm gonna hop in on that music note because oh, that's kind of a nice, I didn't plan it that way, music note. But anyway, just because I really enjoyed the soundtrack for this. So I'd love to ask just those scenes we hear the music. I don't know if every song was original song, but like we hear the music and we see the wild horses just roaming. Can you talk about just staging those scenes?
Yeah, so all of the music that we use in the film, we advances the story. We didn't just be like, oh, we've got this, really, well-known musician. Let's just pop in and do a music montage. It all like we do a lot of sound ups underneath, and I think that we use the music in a really, sort of innovative way to help that be part of the storytelling. So, I think the shot that one of the scenes you're talking about is we've got a Bruce Springsteen song called "Chasing Wild Horses," and it comes right out of that story about Velma Wild Horse Annie Johnston, and then we do this part of the film where we were really fortunate at Magic Hour in Wyoming. Magic Hour being where the lighting is just perfect. Well, we had our aerial shot. We had our drone in the sky, and this band of wild horses was we could see them in the distance, and they come by us, and we were just where it wasn't bothering them. We weren't hovering above them, and the sound wasn't affecting them. We were very cautious to kind of keep it away for safety purposes, but we just got this unbelievable shot of these wild horses streaking across, the Wyoming sagebrush and kicking up the dust, and it was breathtaking. Even when I see it now, it takes my breath away. And then you add Bruce Springsteen to it, and it's a real beautiful moment in the film. And we also used the music to for the audience to sort of kind of catch your breath to move on to some of the next stories. And I was really happy with that. But those shots, we have a wonderful cinematographer named Brian Pratt, and he really delivered on some really beautiful shots of wild horses.
Oh, great. Yeah, now that you mention it, it really does kind of help with the structure of it. So that's awesome. Finding that in your editing.
And the Emmylou Harris song, same thing, where it was a story of a woman who's a trainer who's never seen wild horses, but she's trained them for 10 years. And she does this performance. It's like a dance with her horse. And we use this beautiful song by Emmylou Harris called Ballad of a Runaway Horse. And then we cut to scenes of Wyoming where her horse came from. So, we have this weave of the story that helps to to really kind of, again, capture the emotion of the scene and the emotion of that trainer. And it works really well.
Okay, great. Now, okay, can I ask two quick ones? Because I think one will be a bit.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, I think one will be a bit more loaded. One's a bit. I'll start with the fluffy one just because I like it. The film has such like a companionship between wild horses and people, right? I feel like for mainly in film, it's either a guy and his dog or a guy and their horse, or a woman and their horse kind of thing. So, do you have any favorite horse movies?
Well, I'm a fan of Westerns, just in general. So, in terms of that, of an individual sort of bond, not necessarily, but what I always liked about Westerns is that, and I'm a huge fan of Clint Eastwood's, is that, the horse and the cowboy, had a relationship. A strong relationship, and we touch on that in the film as well, about that. And so that's why I always, while we were making this film, we were very cognizant of the lineage and the history of horses and people, and from from working horses, from companionship to the west, to our migration to the west. The horse was there by our side, whether underneath you or pulling the wagon, every step of the way. And that was in the back of my mind a lot while making this movie.
Okay, awesome. And just my last one, do you, like, you were talking about how you had the women who were starting the PZP as well as the veterans group. I just love to, how did you hear about both of those groups?
So on the veterans one first, when I was doing sort of my, research and due diligence on the subject matter, I had come across a veterans group in Southern California. I had done, gone out there and just done research and that actually was the very beginning of this project, which was like, huh, well, that's interesting, Mustangs and veterans, because I've done other pieces with veterans with service dogs and those, a couple of those stories. And I was really intrigued that these wild horses were able to be, to come from living completely free to now having this bond, and then having all these horse people tell me, no, it's very different with wild horses and Mustangs. Like, it's very different. It's not, they're not just horses. And I like, okay, but I kept hearing that over and over again, like, that Mustangs can look into your soul. And I kept hearing these things like the Mustang and the people. And I was like, okay, there's something here. So I knew that if we could get a veteran story in there, that would be, I think really help with the story. But we went down to Fort Worth to film at this competition, and we just were very fortuitous that a veterans group adopted one of the horses that we were following with a trainer. So that just happened. That was kismet. We were very, very lucky that we got that veteran story. I knew I wanted one, but if it didn't happen, it didn't happen. But this one happened literally. That group adopted the horse that we were following, which was crazy.
In your lap. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then, for the darters, the women who in Colorado that are doing fertility control. So part of the research was finding that, fertility control has been around for over 30 years. It's being used with other, with like the wild horses, when I mentioned in Assateague and Chincoteague, Virginia, it's being used there. It's being used on other species. So it's a proven technology. It's not like this new thing. So all roads kept leading back to that has to be one of the tools on the table when you manage wild horses, whether it be the numbers or whether it be because of drought. There's reasons that you can't just let them be free. You can't just, look the other way and just say, well, whatever happens, because horses are suffering on some of these areas because of lack of food or water. There's, it needs to be management. There's a reason it's called the Bureau of Land Management, because it has, these horses need to be managed. So I did research about fertility control, and I looked at different groups that were doing it, and a lot of filmmaking and documentaries is doing all that research and conversations and site visits and work ahead of time to make sure that you're vetting the group, that that they're doing things properly, that they've got a good reputation, that you're going to put them on this big stage. They better be doing things right. And I had talked to other people that I respected in the industry, and they they said, you should check out these women. They're doing a pretty good program. So all of that led to this group, and they're a really powerful. They're a force. They're incredible women that are literally going out and volunteering and darting, giving the vaccine to these horses. And that came about through research and almost more of a kind of a journalistic approach to the story.
Okay, awesome. Arpit, you want to ask your wrap up one?
Yeah, sure. So I have like two questions. I'll just merge it into one and ask. So what is the key takeaway you want audience to take from your film? And also, I would love to know that, you seems like a very thoughtful guy. So I'd love to ask you the question, what success mean to you as a filmmaker, and what success mean to you as an individual?
Yeah. So, in terms of, I'll answer the first one, the second one first about success. Success to me is finding a story. First of all, making independent documentaries is very hard. Just like to say, it's very, very difficult. I mean, we were on this project for several years because of the way we were filming this, and they're tough stories to make. So success to me is making sure that you find a subject matter that you just are incredibly passionate about and stay passionate about it throughout the whole thing. If anything, I'm more passionate about the subject now than even when I started. And I was, you have to be all in to, as a producer, you're the one that carries the ball all the way to the end zone. But success to me is opening other people's eyes to a really great story. It's really nothing more or less than that. I really want people to be inspired. I come from a philosophy of that change comes from inspiration and not desperation, right? I want people to be inspired. I always try to find the good and find hope even in darkness. So, you know, and the world of wild horses is very emotional and can be, you know, can be dark at times because there's a lot of fighting between groups. And I would like to see people working together more on this issue, because, you know, it's a hard issue and you can't just wish it away or wish things change. You have to really do the work and have relationships. And that also kind of leads into my sort of takeaway of what I want, you know, people to do is, you know, I want people to find what they care about and to do something about it. You know, again, like not be just passive. When I mean do something about it, I'm talking about, you know, being involved civically and, you know, talk to your elected officials and make it be known that this issue that you care about. Because that matters. Even though when you're dealing with a gigantic bureaucracy to make change for wild horses, you still have to, as a constituent, let your elected official know that you care about this. But it doesn't have to be about wild horses. If you're watching this film, I want people to recognize that change doesn't magically happen, right? Change doesn't just, you can't just, you know, say, oh, I want it to be different. I mean, you've got to put in the work and you have to educate yourself and find, and really not just Google something and look for the first 3 responses, because, you know, a lot of people look, and there's a lot of people that have, you know, been very clever on making sure their message is at the top of these search engines. I mean, this stuff is not easy, but I do want people to find issues that they care about. You know, I care about the natural world. I care about the environment. I care about animals. You know, I care about, you know, things. I care, you know, the human issues, of course. I mean, but you know, you have to find that you really want to help preserve and be here for future generations. Because, you know, we're all renters passing through. None of us are homeowners. We're all renters as we pass through, and we need to be good stewards. You know, we need to be good stewards of our land and of our animals, and I really want people to recognize that and let their voices be known, because there's a lot of work to be done, and you know, I think collectively we have a lot more power than we realize.
Okay.
Awesome.
Great. Fantastic.
Sorry, so we open theatrically soon. We're going to be on iTunes and we're going to be on a streamer, and we're going to be posting all that information is going to be at our website, themustangsfilm.com. So themustangsfilm.com will have a link to our social media pages. We'll be posting all kinds of stuff. We're in film festivals. I mean, there's you know, we just launched, as you know, we just, you know, made our announcement. So, you know, we just started talking about this movie, and so that's why I'm really thrilled to talk to you guys. But we've got a lot of good things coming, and we can't wait to, you know, get it in front of people so they can watch it on a lot of different platforms.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much, Steven, for chatting about your film then with us on the Movie Buff Show.
Yep, The Mustangs, America's Wild Horses, coming to you soon.
Awesome, cool.